Peter, this is our sponsor, Cycling Frog. It's seltzer. It's seltzer with pot in it. And you know how I know it works? Because I'm holding the can upside down.
I saw that.
Cyclingfrog.com. Use the code SUM for stand-up memories, and you will get a discount. And you will love this stuff. 5 milligram or 2 milligram size. It's fantastic. Cyclingfrog.com.
Get buzzed without the alcohol. Here it is right side up.
Oh.
All right, there's another episode of Stand Up Memories. Jackie, Martling, Peter Bales. We have...
Look at your hair.
Look at my hair. And you're about to see Joe.
I hope our guest doesn't have hair like that.
No, our guest has better hair. I don't know. We could duke that out. But he's got great hair, and he's known in the business as the Bolsterian Connection. Ladies and gentlemen, a terrific comedian, Joe Bolster. All right, there he is.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks so much for
Thank you for coming on. You look
my pleasure.
terrific.
I can only, I got to go in about 2 minutes, but this is going to be great.
A great background, and you are now a man, a gentleman of the manor, and you're upstate, and
yes.
And now this guy had I don't want to say had, but apparently we had your manager on, Rory Rosegarden, and he described you as retired. And you've had this incredible career. How do you retire? How do you know when it's time to retire? Are you real? Is he right? Are you really retired? There's no template for comedians.
My definition, I tell people I'm retired until the phone rings. And then I say yes. And
With
I
a gig.
It's
Jerry Stanley. Where's your car? Well,
really? Retired?
Well, Peter, you may remember that I had another passion in life, which is running.
Yes.
And I always wanted to get back to that in some way at some point in my life. And a few years ago, I decided it was time. When my kids were sophomores in high school, I volunteered as a coach at their school. And I just finished my 9th year there as a volunteer. And that morphed into cross country, coaching the girls. Just finished my 4th year doing that. And then because the school did not have a winter track team, putting the kids at a huge disadvantage when they would come out for spring track and run against kids that have been running since the previous fall in cross country and winter track, I created a nonprofit winter track team. And in 2019, I realized I'm coaching 50 weeks a year, and comedy it was time. If I wanted to pursue this, as a fairly young person, that was the time to,
That makes total sense.
I wouldn't call working 50 weeks a year retired.
Yeah, that's not retired.
For no money. I'm a volunteer.
No, but I must tell you,
you switched tracks is what you did.
Yeah, I did, and I love it. It's so rewarding. I mean, show business is kind of me business, and this is an endeavor where you are nurturing kids and watching them prosper and grow as not only people but as runners. And I never get tired of seeing these kids improve. And it's unlike show business, which it's very subjective. You could have it would be like if you ran 100 meters and people went, yeah, the guy that won was nice, but that guy in 6th with the blue shorts, he's the winner.
Joe, what you're basically saying is you went from being a comic to being a good person.
Yes, it was a tough transition. But track is just so black and white. The winner is the winner, and there's none of this. Well, I think I'm better than this guy. It's very clear, which is why, as a coach, you never get any grief from parents. I hear from other coaches in like basketball or soccer where a parent will call, I think my son's a little bit better than the kid running. Well, track, it's all time, distances, and heights, and it's very clear where you stand, which I really like. After years in a business, it's very subjective.
And people don't get on a track team because they have a car and they can drive to one-night gigs in New Jersey.
That's true. Especially at this age, I don't have to make 14 years with driver's licenses.
Joe, I still tell a story, and I've always wondered if you'd remember this. And I have a picture that I got to give to Mike to put. I got a picture of as a comic strip when it was you and John Heyman and me and David the ventriloquist and Joe and Middleman. It's a classic picture. And those days were so great, but it was really the beginning of the whole thing. And there were rules that weren't set yet. In the old days, like 3 people went to a gig. Well, you want to open? You want to open? It wasn't like middle headliner and all that. And I'll never forget this. It was me and you and Paul Reiser. And do you remember Jim Balatzos?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So Jim Balatzos picked up you and me and Reiser to go do a gig in Jersey. It was a Sunday night, and we were doing a show at a bowling alley. And we showed up at the bowling alley, and he went up to the door, and it was locked. It was locked, and I saw him pound on the door. And while he was up there, I said to you guys, you realize we've done what we're supposed to do.
We showed up.
So we get paid no matter what.
Yeah.
So he came back in and said, well, sorry, guys. And I said, well, we get paid. You know, he said, what are you talking about? I said, well, we're here ready to do the show. And he had to pay us anyway. And I can still remember Ryder saying to me, you're very good at this. But that kind of set the line in the sand. Like, he's the producer, we're the comedians, and he hired us. Do you have any memory of that night at all?
I do not.
Well, although you blocked it out, which makes perfect sense.
I imagine had we actually gone, if the crowd had not liked us, they would have hit reset. But I don't know. You said it was in Jersey? A Jersey gig? You said it was a Jersey gig?
Of course.
I'm sure you blocked it out. You know,
well, the big question is, did you block out that night, or did you block out the entire thought of Jim Balazzo?
Well, what we call a low-end booker.
Yeah.
And it
but
was
back in the
trial
day,
by fire.
You were happy to have a gig like that. You know,
you
Jerry
were.
Stanley with the Ground Rounds.
Yes.
And all those $50 to $75 a night gigs. That was, bread and butter.
You got 50?
That's what I got paid.
Oh, you got 50.
I remember
you
and Reiser came out to do a show. I was producing a show in Glen Cove at a place called the Country Squire, and there were like 3 people there. And I never, I didn't know you guys. You guys like pros. I'm brand new. And you were on stage on this big plywood platform, and in this horrible little restaurant. It was empty, and Reiser sat right in front of you. And every time you did a punchline, he spit water. You guys did spit takes for like a half an hour. I'd never been so entertained. It was fantastic.
Another thing he doesn't remember.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story along those lines. It doesn't involve me, but it's kind of famous. Bill Masters and Ron Zimmerman. Do you know this story?
I think I do. Go ahead.
Well, they went to some, horrible gig in Connecticut, and Bill is the MC, and there's 9 people in the audience, and he's just up there dying. So Ron Zimmerman takes a seat up front, and Bill sees it and picks up the cue and goes, "Hey, sir, how you doing?" "Oh, all right." "Where are you from?" "I live not far away from here." "What do you do for a living?" "I'm a male beauty pageant contestant." And Bill goes, "Oh, that's interesting." He says, "Well, what do you do in the talent contest?" He said, "I sing." And Bill says, "What do you sing?" And he goes, "The Last Train to Clarksville." Just like, all the songs and just not missing a beat. Last Train to Clarksville. Like, what else would I?
Feels right. So, Joe, what year did you?
Great character, Ron Zimmerman.
Ron Zimmerman.
Yeah.
He was.
What year did you start?
1978.
1980. Yes, indeed. And I remember those days pretty much like yesterday. I have stories in my head. You booked us at your alma mater. And do you remember?
You college or high school?
Your college.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's Denison, correct?
Yeah.
And do you remember we went there and they had a stage and they had mic stands, but no microphones and no sound. And we did the show anyway. And we were so new, both you and I used the mic stands without microphones.
Oh, that's great.
Because we didn't know what to do with our hands. Now, have you blocked that out of your mind?
I must have. I swear I've 3
so
gigs
many
now.
of those were such nightmares, like the Jerry Stanley shows at the colleges in the afternoon during lunchtime, like with the
Baruch
silverware and the plates, and oh God, just crazy.
That's funny, Peter, because I remember doing shows at Denison, but I didn't realize you had accompanied to one of them.
Yes. And you had a CB in your car.
Yeah. Well, that does go back.
And
Well,
I'll tell you, you told me, I don't know how you knew this, that
I've never seen you this worked up.
I'm worked up. I haven't seen this guy. So the memories I have with Joe Bolster, first of all, you had a CB, and I had never seen a CB before, and he told me how to do it. Break 1-9 for a westbounder, and over the CB came, "Hello there, this is Sugar Bear." And he explained to me something I should have known, that apparently truck stop hookers monitored the CB radios.
Sure.
Well, you seem to be an expert in this. But I remember, and I go, "Pull over, Joe, pull over." And he's like, "No, we got to get to the gig. We got to get to the gig." I mean,
it never dawned on me. Of course, that what are they called? The lunchtime Phillies? What are they called? The
Truck stop Annie's?
Yeah, something like that.
All right, okay. All right.
That's why someone told me that.
But it's interesting that things that you remember that stick with you. I was thinking today, Joe, okay, correct me on this story. I had an apartment on the Upper West Side, so do you.
Oh, wait. Wait a minute.
Right?
I have a story. You had an apartment, but I did not have an apartment, but you made your apartment available to me should I need it in a certain circumstance. Do you know this story? Okay, so you were out of town, and I had just started the comic strip, and you had too. So we were both newcomers, and I lived in New Jersey, and it was a weekend, and you said, "I'm going away. Here's the key to my apartment if you should need it." I said, "Thank you." So it was a Saturday night at the comic strip. I go on and do the first show. After the show, I meet a young lady who was very interested in my comedic musings, and I took her back to Peter's apartment. And one thing led to another, and I missed my second spot at the comic strip.
Ooh,
congratulations. And this was very, very early in my career, and I did not build up enough equity to have missed a spot and be given a pass. So I knew I had to go back there and face Lucian, and I knew I had to have an extraordinary excuse to get kind of, all right, don't worry about it. So I walk in, and he goes, "Joe, I couldn't help notice you weren't around for the second edition of tonight's evening's performances." I said, "Oh, Lucian, oh my God, you can't believe what happened to me." "What happened?" I said, "Well, I was at Peter Bales' house with a woman for the first show, and one thing led to another, and afterwards, she had an epileptic seizure."
Oh, my, you really told
And without missing a beat, Lucian goes, "Petite or Grand Mal?"
Now let me.
And I had not thought this story through enough. I'm not sure. She was really shivering a lot.
Now let me.
It's like when the cops catch you and they start asking questions. You didn't take it to
the next step. Like, oh my God.
Let me tell the audience that Lucian Hold was the manager of the comic strip in the 80s and beyond, but we knew him in the very early 80s, and he was very nice to me and very nice to Joe, and I thought he was a great guy.
Yeah.
But he was strict, and he did have an upper class kind of condescending way.
Yes.
Even if he liked you, it didn't feel like they told me he liked me, and I never thought he liked me.
He was great to me, and he took his job seriously, cared about the shows, and I wanted.
But the thing he was up against, and it's something that every comedy club person in a position is up against, he's an umpire, and ultimately he's going to make a call that you don't like. And if he called you safe, in our case he did, then he was your buddy. But if not, there were plenty of comics who were rejected by him, and so it was an impossible job to be liked by everybody.
If you're an umpire, somebody's going to like you and somebody's going to hate you. That's the nature.
And if you get the out call, you're most likely to be hating him. But Peter's right. He had kind of a patrician way about him. He was very smart and very well educated, and it could come across kind of snobbish, and he was easily imitated. Every comic in New York had an impression of him. I was listening to the poetry of Robert Lowell the other day, and was most impressed by his iambic pentameter. But one time, again, back when I lived in New Jersey, we used to play. The comic strip had a softball team, and we would play on Monday mornings. And I lived 2.5 hours away in New Jersey. So on Sunday nights, I would stay at Lucian's apartment and then go to the game with him the next day. And the first time I ever did this, he closed the comic strip at about 2 a.m, way back when they would stay up until the bitter end. And then we took his motorcycle across town, and we get to his apartment, and he unfolds one of those fold-out couches, and I get it. Now it's 3 a.m, and I'm tripping off. And he's sitting at the foot of the bed just pontificating, about, "I'll tell you a funny story about Tante, the former United Nations General Secretary, who was tragically killed in a plane crash circa 1968 with Dag Hammarskjöld, who replaced him. And at some point, I fell asleep. And I don't know how long I was asleep, but when I woke up, he was still talking to me. So there had been a period of some seconds at least where he was talking to a person completely asleep that had gone unnoticed by him, and he was just jabbering away about who knows what. But he was a character.
I love it. I love it. These are memories. These are memories from the early 80s of new comedians when we were young and trying to start out, and the times were insane. They were totally different from now. The clubs were different. The comedy was different. The audiences were different.
The other day, I got stuck on who was the third guy. There was Richie Tinkin and
Bob Wax.
And
John
McGowan.
God, I couldn't think of that the other day.
Yeah, he was kind of the. John was the beer guy, the liquor, beer, food guy. Bob was sort of the outside guy that they had brought in. They didn't know, John and Richie knew each other from the neighborhood in the Bronx, and then thought they needed somebody who was kind of showbiz savvy. So that's how they got connected to Bob. He was not a friend with theirs prior to opening the club. And then Richie kind of became the face of the club.
Yeah,
Richie's gift was
Bob had the connections in show business, and Richie Tinkin and John McGowan had the connection with the Westies Irish gang.
Well, you know that story about, when Eddie Murphy made, he made 2 hits in a row, Trading Places and 48 Hours, something like that. And then his third movie was shot on location in like the Golan Heights or something like that. It was in the Mideast. And by this point, he had developed apparently a dislike for Bob Wax. And Eddie was petrified that given the location of this movie, he was going to get killed in a bombing attack by Iran. So he insisted that Bob Wax had to be on location with him, because if he was going to die, he wanted Bob Wax to die with him.
And I'm sure everybody was like, take him with you, take him with you.
Well, yeah, and apparently Bob's wife said, why do you have to go to Iran? Well, Eddie insisted I'd be there, and I got to go. And hope there's no bombing attack.
Now listen, Jackie, I insist. I've wanted to do this. Joe, we could talk about your career forever, but I really, you were such good friends with somebody that I still miss and I still admire. And I just wanted to give you a chance to reflect in any way you want on the late, great Dennis Wolfberg.
Dennis was such a great guy. In fact, the first time I ever met him, I started a small club in Philadelphia called Grandma Minnie's back in the day. And at that time, the club would import comics mostly from New York to come down and do Friday and Saturday shows. Occasionally, I'd get an LA person like Jay Leno worked there, Bobby Kelton, Glenn Super, Gallagher did a show back then, Bruce Baum. But most of New York, most of the actors, the comics were coming from New York. Jimmy Brogan would come down. And one day it was Dennis Wolfberg, and I'd never seen him before. And this club did not draw well. Friday nights were sort of typical of most comedy clubs, the second show in particular. 6 people there, no energy. And I never forget Dennis just performing like the place was full. And you may recall that he would close his act back in the day by singing American Pie and then covering his face with yogurt.
Yes, I remember.
He would, it was just, I guess a bit was something about how he had read that there was a certain area of Russia where people were centenarians and they attributed their longevity to eating yogurt. So he would then, I don't know what the bit was, why he justified ending his act just covered in his face with yogurt while singing American Pie. And that's quite a commitment right there, that bit.
But he didn't sing a bar. He sang the whole song.
He sang the whole song, and he's dripping yogurt, and there's 6 people in the audience. And that was my first exposure to him. And I thought, man, this guy's a keeper. I mean, because a lot of times in that situation, you phone it in or you give half an effort because you're not going to get anything back, so you don't want to look foolish. He didn't care. And I remember being so impressed by that energy and commitment to the bit. He was going to perform as if it was 5,000 people and they were all laughing. And cut to several months later, I came to the comic strip for the first time, and he was the first guy I saw that night. I said, oh, here's a friendly face. And he was a friendly face. Everybody adored Dennis because he was so generous. He had such a great way about him. And for him to be taken so young, it's really a tragedy. And he was just starting to kind of click.
Life, he was exuberant,
Absolutely. He really just talk about a positive attitude. And I used to tease him all the time because there were times when he would be kind of an Eddie Haskell sort of person. I don't know, Jackie, if you knew about this, but Peter, I think, attended many of Lucian Hold's mom's Labor Day parties on Labor Day. She lived in upstate New York, about an hour north of the city. And Lucian would invite up all this comic strip comics for a Labor Day party. And it was great. There was horseshoes and badminton and volleyball and lobster and this and that. And Lucian's mom was the host. And Dennis would always go, oh, I so appreciate this spread of lobster tails and steak. And, you know, just right on the edge of being a suck up. So I would always stand behind him and go, like that, just to kind of get him going, because that would make him laugh when he realized I was kind of teasing his faux sincerity. I mean, he did mean it, but it was a little over the top. Oh, the new day covers in the living room or so. Come on, Dennis.
Yeah, anybody who's too nice was suspicious, you know.
Yeah.
In those days, you know.
Yeah, right.
You look to see if his hand is in your pocket, you know.
What's your real agenda here? But Dennis,
let me tell you
really
this much. What a sense of humor Wolfberg had. What a sense of irony. We did a one night, you got 50, I probably got a $40 and a cheeseburger if the cook has time. That was my pay. We did a one-nighter in New Jersey, and we're driving, it might have been Palazzo, so just some horrible place where we had fun and we learned our chops, where we got our comedy chops. And he was a tenured math teacher in the New York City school system.
Yeah.
That very day, he had resigned his tenure to go full-time into comedy. That very day, and that night, we're doing this gig and driving back into Manhattan. The comic who was driving.
No, you can't tell a story.
I got it.
We were driving, me and you. I picked up you and Wolfberg and had my amplifier and the sound system in the car. And on the way there, my car broke down. We actually knocked on a door and called the club. They came and picked us up. The three of us and the microphone stand and the amplifier, and my car sat there. We did the show. At the end of the night, a waitress told me her brother could fix my car and I could spend the night with her family, not with her. But we took these guys because Wolfberg, and he had quit his job that day and was so excited because he gave me a comedian, but he had parked his car in Manhattan where they come around and tow your car at 6 a.m. So they had to go back. So me and this waitress dropped these guys off under the Route 3 sign on the way back to Manhattan. And I just remember.
All right, I had that part. Okay.
You were in the ballpark.
I was in the ballpark.
You're leaving me out of the story.
I left Jackie was part of the story. Now, to me, what I remember is we were, Dennis and I, and you know, it must have been 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, are hitchhiking on the entrance ramp to the New Jersey Turnpike on the day that he resigned his tenure. And he was standing there with his thumb out, and in a way only Dennis could do it. He looked at me and said, I'm not sure I've made the right decision.
Classic.
I mean, that is classic. And he was, of course, he was all in, and he was amazing. And you said it, you know, he was taken too soon, just on the cusp of, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
you know,
I'm sure, I don't know if other people have told these stories, but there's a couple of great stories about Dennis. Like going back to the early days of the comic strip, he got on one night, one of those late night spots with about 4 people in the crowd, and he starts going away and doing his all stuff. And at one point, a couple minutes in, the waitress off the side goes, Dennis. He looks at her, what? There's nobody here.
That's the same as I had that happen to me with Jerry Seinfeld.
4 people had left. He couldn't see in the lights.
That's totally believable. That happened to me. The same thing. That is so funny. Dennis Wolfberg went up on stage one night at the comic strip late. We called it late night. You weren't even on the schedule, but they would put you up back in those days to develop comedians for 4 people. He goes up in his bikini underpants and nothing else.
No.
You know, because you know, Larry Miller was probably there wrapped up in a tablecloth with a machete, pretending to be the angry cook. And do you remember the insanity of these days?
Yeah.
And Dennis is up there and he's doing his act in bikini underpants. And Mark Schiff, it totally makes sense to me that he would do this, ran up from the side. Dennis didn't see it and pulled him all the way down.
That's wonderful.
And he got him back up quickly, but they went all the way down to his ankles. He pulled him up fast. And I will say this on the podcast, you heard it first. Dennis Wolfberg was a natural redhead, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, that's good to know. There's a lot of questions about that. A lot of mystery. You know, another story about him. He was doing the Comedy Works in Philadelphia. Did you guys work that place?
I love the
Comedy Works
story.
in Philadelphia.
Unbelievable.
So he was accompanied. Apparently, they had I think part of Dennis's act at the time required a piano player, and they had a house piano player who was blind. And it was Dennis's job at the end of his act to escort this guy off stage. And I guess, so Dennis does his show, and it was kind of a thin crowd, and Dennis got concerned that the applause would die before he got off stage. But he has this extra chore of having to escort a blind man off. So, kind of fading, and he grabs the guy by the elbow and slams the guy into the door in his face. Poor guy who's knocked himself out trying to help Dennis act. Suddenly he's getting a grade 4 concussion because Dennis can't get him out of there quickly enough. But another story about the necessity for having a car back in the day, because I had something similar. I again lived in New Jersey, and one time I drove up the Improv to do some gig on Long Island where you would go in another car with other comics. So I park my car, we go to Long Island, we come back, and it's now very late at night, 1 o'clock, and I go to get my car, and it's not there. And I went, oh my God. So I go to the local precinct, I report the car stolen, and a cop gave me $10. He said, if you go to Port Authority, I know you don't have a lot of money, here's $10, you can get a bus home. I said, thank you so much. And I'm walking to Port Authority when I realized, wait a minute, I don't park on 43rd Street, I park on 44th Street. So I go over there, there's my car, I get home, and I start driving home, and I go to a gas station, and a cop pulls up behind me, and I realize, wait a minute, I'm driving a stolen car. Because I had reported stolen, I hadn't undone that, and now so here I am at the wheel.
Oh, that's
I'm sure this guy, what are you doing? It's my car, officer. I got back in it. When I got home, I realized that I had to, let them know that I found the car, and I didn't want to say, well, I just forgot where I parked it. So the guy gets on the phone. I said, yeah, I was there a couple hours ago, and my car was stolen, I thought. But I went back, and it was stolen, but the guy, I guess he just took it for a joyride and came back and put it where I parked it. Thanks, bye.
I want to tell, now you may have blocked this out, but I have memory of this. You might have said somebody said something. Catch a Rising Star, very early 80s. Remember the comedian Sandra Bernhard?
Yeah.
All right.
Uh-oh.
She would go on at Catch a Rising Star and bomb every night.
Yeah.
And we all knew it. And a bunch of us
she was really cute.
A bunch of us would stand in the back. And I remember I think you're the one who said it, a piece of truth. I think Bill Maher was there. I think Paul Reiser was there. I think Mark Shipp was there. We're standing in the back. And the word on Sandra Bernhard was, even though she was bombing every night, she was too hip for the room.
Right, right.
And I believe it was you, but everybody I just mentioned cracked up hysterically. And I think it was Joe Bolster who said, in a voice we all heard in the back, she's not too hip for the room. She just sucks. I believe that was a Bolsterian comment that was we all doubled over, Joe. It needed to be said.
The Emperor's New Clothes.
That is a modern version of the Emperor. I'm saying this to compliment you.
Well, no, she was kind of strange in that the comics could never figure out why she was getting so much attention, because she would go on in front of younger audiences. So clearly that's her audience, and nobody was reacting. And it wasn't like the comics were getting it.
The comics weren't getting it. The audience wasn't getting it.
She was real head
prime spots.
Yeah, I guess she was maybe she's in the vanguard of what alternative comedy where being funny is no longer required, or having a premise.
Right.
But yeah, I remember being puzzled by her success back in the day. I mean, eventually she was more known as an actress, I would think.
Yes. Now, Joe, I thought about this today. I have a memory of this. And this
you guys have better memories than I do.
By
the way, is this your 5th season?
This is our 5th season.
We call them seasons. We do.
Yeah, I got you. I like the background.
5th season. And by the way,
your backdrop is great.
We what?
I like your backdrops. Very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And guess
everything about
what?
it.
Guess
Little,
what? As long as you reminded me, we have a new sponsor.
you do.
Yes, called the Cycling Frog, and it's a
The cycling frog.
cycling frog.
I see.
It's
Okay.
a cannabis company.
Okay.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm just hearing about this now.
This is seltzer infused with THC. It's about the size of a Red Bull, and it's got 5 grams of THC, and it's so gentle, and it's so nice. It's like it's just wild stuff, and it's really, really fun.
Is it actual grass? I mean, is
No,
it THC or whatever?
It has THC, and it has CBD. And Jackie has tried it and loved it.
It's great. It's just infused. If you didn't know, you'd have no idea there was any kind of weed in there. And, you know, some things have aftertaste and stuff.
I can just see a guy in court. Your Honor,
it's
Jackie
fun.
Martling said it was not. So
I'm going to try this.
Joke
I
man.
want this. I'm going to try
You're right. I probably shouldn't listen to the joke man.
All right. No, I'm going to try this. It's called the Cycling Frog, and it's very cool. Lots of flavors.
What's your flavor? What's that flavor?
That's wild cherry.
Wild cherry.
Now,
wild cherry.
A couple things I want to get. Oh man, we're running long, probably, right? I blew the signal, but we're having so much fun here.
Well,
couple
first
things.
Of all, I think we should. I'm sure not the first to note this, but Peter, there are many times when you were driving back from a gig, and as you go through the toll booth, you're reminded of the joke man. Everywhere.
That's right, because he had these 922 wine stickers for his joke line, and you would put them in the toll basket.
Jackie, how did that work? This is back when the days when the toll booths were still manned or womaned. Would they object, or would you just hit and run? How'd you put them on there?
No, I would put them in the toll basket. Remember the toll baskets where you throw the quarters in? But
I thought they were on the booth.
Well, there too, like if somebody was paying the toll, I would hang out the window and slap, because they were backed with adhesive, so nobody's looking. I put them all over the country.
I know.
People used to go nuts at where they found them.
But did you ever do it in front?
Do you remember in Florida there were lots of wild girls that used to chase us around, and this girl Unique had a party at her house, and we went over there, and I went in the bathroom and I lifted up the top of the toilet bowl, and just above the water line, I put a 922 wine sticker and put the top back on. And like a couple months later, a couple of the guys went berserk because she had a New Year's Eve party with 1 million comics there. So of course the bathroom, the toilet overflowed, and one of the guys lifted up the toilet tank. And there's the stupid 922 wine sticker.
In Florida.
In Florida, the Florida comic strip. Just great.
So I want to tell, I swear I have a memory of this. It might not be exact. I'm not hallucinating, but here you are, retired, living in comfortable circumstances, obviously. There's a naked guy behind you in the window. Okay.
No, it's just a shirt, t-shirt.
Okay, he's got a shirt on. Okay, good.
Don't get all worked up.
I didn't mean to offend anybody.
And our memories are when we were starting out and we had no money and it was tough, but we were young, and I could never do that again, for example. You think there's only room in your life once to handle that. I think you'd agree with that. But we had apartments and $400 a month aside. So Joe, is it true? This is true. I remember it. You had an apartment and the plumbing broke. The toilet didn't work at all. And I'm going ahead with this.
Go ahead.
You had to do number 2. And you did it in a plastic bag, and you tied it up, and you
do this to every guest.
No, I don't. It's true. I just want the audience to understand that these were wild times with stand-up memories, and you took the plastic bag with the number 2 in it, and you went to throw it out your back window, and it somehow hit a railing or something and ricocheted back down a couple floors below onto your neighbor's terrace. Do you have any memory of that?
No.
No, what do you know? That would be the one to forget. For sure.
Yeah.
I have a memory. You think in somehow
I remember that. Why would you bring that up?
Because it's so absurd, and our lives back then in many ways were absurd, and that's.
I think what you should do is every comic comes on, claim it was happened to them until you hit the right person.
Right, just until he finally comes to the one that it actually happened to.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be tough to forget that. I don't recall anything of that nature.
Can you?
I don't think I had a back window.
No, listen. Please think about it. If it comes back into your memory,
yeah, sure. I'll get back to you immediately.
Please get back to me on that. But just one thing he will remember. This guy used to run me. We used to go running in Riverside Park. You do remember that?
Absolutely.
And you had patience because he was a serious runner and I was just trying to get through it without dying. But that was fun. That was memorable. One time a guy passed us and I'll never forget. We're running and Joe was like, the guy kept going and our normal course curved and Joe was like, and we followed him and we passed him.
Oh, you came with me.
I came with you and I survived it.
Now I don't believe that.
Yeah, that part of it, I was going to say that story's strange credulity. I could see me running him down, but
yeah,
no.
You were hanging with me.
I was with you. We caught him, and we passed him, and then
I think you waited until you were sure that Bolster didn't remember anything, right? So he could not call you.
I really need some counseling because I have.
You understand? I have to do shows with him, Joe. Right?
I'm not making that up.
Shows with him.
I feel like maybe you've already been hitting that product a little too much.
I think it's wonderful in a way. Your life has come full circle because you sound like you're in a great place, and that doing what you love with the track. It's a track team, right? It's a cross.
Yeah, it's a competitive team. I just had a kid run the national championships, Junior Olympics down in Texas.
Wow, good.
I have some good runners.
Oh, that's cool. That is so cool. Now, what we always do at the end of a show is we say, please, we want to have you on again.
Oh, I'd love to have you be on again. One thing that Jackie isn't aware of, Peter, that maybe we should mention to him. This is a session that Peter and I had way back in the day, late at night. We would visit a Subway in his neighborhood, and we got convinced that the gentleman who served us every night at 2 a.m. was actually Rod Carew, who was still an active baseball player at the time. So I don't know how he was doing this
on the Minnesota Twins.
Yes,
I remember it like it was yesterday.
He was a spitting image of Rod Carew.
He was. I remember that, Joe. You're in denial on some of these episodes.
I guess so. That's why a second appearance might be helpful. My memory might be jogged.
Yes, I want you to think about your next appearance. You're terrific, and you look great.
I have a question about you. How do you plug that product? Do you do it within the show, or is there like a little commercial that's inserted?
No.
This frog pot, whatever it is.
Frog pot.
Cycling frog.
No, we do the live.
Now you know how the frogs jump so high.
There you go.
Jumping frog of Calaveras County.
Yes. See the education? He's mentioning
these frogs never bump their ass.
That is a short story by Rod Serling. What?
When do you plug that?
We plug it during the podcast.
Oh, you do? This is counting as a plug.
This is a plug.
I see. So you just kind of ad-lib it. You don't have to read any copy or...
No.
That's bullshit.
That's for established professionals.
Speaking of that, I'll tell you a funny story. It has nothing to do with me or comedy, but one day I was walking across the street at 97th and Lexington, and the light was red, so I stopped there, and I was wearing I used to collect vintage baseball hats, and I was wearing a St. Louis Browns hat. And an elderly gentleman is standing next to me, looks over, and goes, "That's a St. Louis Browns hat, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah." I said, I grew up with the St. Louis Browns. This guy had to be 80 years old. I said, "Oh, really?" He said, yeah, I used to listen to them on the radio. Dizzy Dean was the color man. And he said one of their products sponsors was a local beer called Grisidic, spelled like Gresidick. And he said Dizzy Dean would come on during the innings and go, "Folks, it's a kind of a hot day out there, kind of a perfect time to get yourself a couple of nice cold greasy dicks. Nothing better on a hot day than a couple of cold greasy dicks. Get a greasy dick and swallow a nice cold greasy dick on a hot July day." I'm sure the announcer was going,
"I love that stuff."
That is hysterical.
An
All
ice
right,
cold Greaser-Dick.
this is an ice cold cycling frog.
All right,
What?
enough with this.
All right.
We really got to.
I love this
We've
stuff.
done double time.
We went, you know what? We went way over, but this is Joe Bolster, ladies and gentlemen.
How long
Joe,
is the show
thank you.
normally?
25 to 30 minutes.
Oh,
We blew the light, as they
Okay.
say. when you're in-
We blew right through it, but we will do this again.
guys, can I say I really enjoyed? I watched it many times before. I think you're doing a great job. It's a nice little slice of life that I think people enjoy. And thank you so much for having me on. Have you had on Bill Sheft?
We're going to have him on.
Because we were
Absolutely.
at Hiram's, memorial service. We were talking about how we'd never gotten the call from you guys. So,
But you know what? It takes nerve for us to call people because there's not 1,000 billion
Yeah.
people watching this.
yeah,
Like you don't want people to go what and hang up. And now we got Robert Klein's coming on, and
Great.
maybe Peter Noon. I didn't even tell you about Peter Noon.
Peter Noon.
Peter Noon.
He's
What's that connection?
he's an old friend. Well, he used to come on the Stern Show,
Yeah.
and every time he came on, me and Fred Norris, the other writer, we would write a parody.
Of
Mrs. Brown, you got a lovely
Yeah.
daughter. And Peter would sing it cold, right off the lyrics. And it was like, Barbara Bush looks older than she oughta, or Gary's teeth are greener than they should be. And he would laugh and do them, and he just is a
He's a good
great
sport.
guy. And then we kind of, I hooked him up actually for Gilbert's podcast.
uh-huh.
So that was, so we kind of have
have
it's not my bosom buddy, but we have a connection.
And ironically, as a historian, I'm an expert in the reign of Henry VIII.
Yes. So it's perfect
Jesus
storm.
It's not the same unless Peter ends the podcast with one of his horrible, horrible jokes.
All
that
right.
was good.
Thank
Well,
you.
Go
ahead.
He covered. He covered a Kinks song. You know which Kinks song they covered?
The Kinks.
The Herman's Hermits to the Kinks?
Yes.
What?
Dandy.
Is that was originally a Kinks?
Yeah.
Is that
You know
right?
that song? Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been Rock and Roll Memories.
We'll be right back with the lead singer of the Grassroots after this commercial from Jiffy Lube.
Hey,
Rob
I could talk about old rock and roll.
You love that early rock and roll stuff?
I do.
I just read the greatest goddamn book. It's called, I forget, I think it's called Whatever Happened to Me, but it's by P.F. Sloan. Did you ever hear that name?
Wasn't he a critic for the Rolling Stone?
No,
he's a writer.
He's like a Forrest Gump. He's like a Zella guy. He's connected to everybody, and it's amazing early rock and roll. And the guy's out of it, you got to read it. Just look up P.F. Sloan.
How early? Are you talking about the 50s or 60s?
60s.
Oh, our wheelhouse.
He did the guitar introduction to California Dreamin'. He turned VJ onto the Beatles, VJ, the label.
Yep.
I mean, all these different things. It's not believable, but it's all true.
Wow.
P.F. Sloan.
I've taught college, some undergraduates, and I was teaching about the 50s and the 60s, and I said to a group of undergraduates, now I'm going to talk about a group that changed the course of music, had a uniquely new sound, certainly the greatest rock and roll group ever. And this kid right down front goes, you mean Green Day?
American Idiot?
I said, class dismissed.
That's
Hey,
funny.
Joe,
And probably everybody in the class probably thought he was right.
they did.
Yeah.
They did. They don't even know the Beatles.
I know,
Has been all right. I'm going to put some order down here. Joe, your assignment is to come on again. Your assignment is to try and remember the true stories I told today. And you always were terrific. You are terrific now. And we will see you again soon, I hope. I am Peter Bales. This is
Jackie Martling. Thank you, Joe Bolster.
Thank you guys. It was a pleasure.
All right. See you next time.